Welcome back to THISDAY Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Now with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akinterinwa, former Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, currently Director General Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies. Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough, and Chike Ogeah, former Commissioner for Information, Delta State. Well, Chike, I'm sure you listened to our guest for today, Senator Dino Melaye, and he had a lot to say about the president failing to show up at the House of Representatives on Thursday, despite his earlier promise. He also talked about electoral reform, expectations from the newly reconfirmed INEC chairman, management of elections, COVID-19, and general politics, APC, PDP, and what should be the attitude of politicians towards governance issues. So, Chike, I'll start with you.
Well, it was a very interesting interview, if you ask me. Looking at the interview, I didn't even really know which emotion to feel. Because we heard Dino saying all the right things as a PDP member. But if we recall, not too long ago, everything Dino was is complaining about today, he was a part of it. Dino was right there in the forefront of the people that hounded Jonathan out of power at that time, as it were, maybe because, the politics at the time didn't suit him. So, you see, that is the problem I have with the kind of politics we play in Nigeria. Basically, what he said, everything is true in terms of we failed in security-wise. There's no capacity in the government. We seem to be directionless. I mean, what kind of audacious attempt was that happened 2 or 3 days ago after the president landed in his home state in Katsina, and then you go and take away so many girls? I mean, the report is still sketchy and all of that. But what happened in Chibok was even small compared to what has just happened. And if you remember, Chibok was the watershed for the Jonathan administration. It is funny, but I just see a lot of poetic justice going around in Nigeria. That's what I can see. All the people, you look at them, whether they are in the PDP or they are still in the APC or those that have been sidelined, that have no party anymore, but all those people that ganged up against Jonathan in what Dino now calls a satanic gang up or whatever, term he used, they are all, getting their common pants. And that is funny. And like I said, very poetic. But more importantly, if we look at what has just transpired, against the best attempts and efforts of the National Assembly, if you asked me, to try and give the president a platform to reach out to Nigerians and say to Nigerians, I feel your pain. If you recall, we discussed this last week, and I did say yes, there were some areas in talking about security that the president might not be comfortable with, but he doesn't even have to go there. All he needed to do was come and give us the reassurance that indeed someone is in charge, and I can see what is happening. Well, and that golden opportunity, if you ask me, has been missed.
Well, on that note, let me go to Prof. Yeah, Prof, very quickly. You also listened to Dino Melaye. What are your thoughts on some of the issues?
He raised a number of issues. Let's begin with his conception of gridocracy. That word, following the conception of democracy. Gridocracy as government of greedy people by greedy government, greedy for greedy people, and so on and so forth. As much as I want to agree with him, I am not greedy, and we are not part of the greediness. So as good as the conception of gridocracy can be patterned after democracy, there has to be an exception to that. His general submission that there is need to discuss the future of the country, and that there is need for state policing, I cannot but agree with him. Chike made a good observation, especially that Dino himself was a part and parcel of Jonathan's problem by that time. So if he's now talking about satanic gang up, well, this has to be understood in the context of what had transpired in the past. But essentially, on the issue of the president refusing to go to the National Assembly to respond to the kind invitation extended to him, I think we should look at that at 3 or 4 complementary levels on a serious note. It is, first of all, a legal issue. We have the proponents and the opponents of his going there. But the issue is that it's a matter of legal fact. We have, and Dino rightly pointed to that, particularly Section 81, I think.
88 subsection 1.
Now, the issue is that, on the one hand, we have a constitutional provision that enables Mr. President, all right, to, a provision enabling the National Assembly to investigate, carry out investigations as to what any individual in the country, including Mr. President, whatever they really need to carry out their business as representative of the people. But we also have another section, I think is either 218.
218, subsection 4, the one quoted by the Attorney General of the Federation.
Section 4B. You see, when you look at this provision too, it says that the president has exclusive powers to monitor, to direct, to control, to the exclusion of others, the military security operations. We now have conflict of law within the framework of the same constitution. I think that one...
There is no conflict.
No, I'm coming.
Sections of the constitution are not to be read in silos. They are to be read conjunctively and with regard to the letter and spirit of the provisions.
I like your beautiful submission. If that is so, why is it that the Attorney General of the Federation is now saying he doesn't have, nobody can compel Mr. President? Why is it that the same Dino is now saying, no, the Senate has the right to do this? You see, conceptually, ideally, when you do a convention, an agreement, a treaty, the preamble is supposed to be used to interpret so that the purpose, the cardinal purpose of an agreement is not misrepresented. We have the military dimension to the issue, apart from the legal aspect. You see, I think Muhammadu Buhari is unfortunate as a president, and for himself, his military calculations are always faulty and very myopic. When, for instance, you have a security problem, a security problem is not supposed to be politicized. We always have law of politics, and we also have politics of law. The problem at stake is security matter. It does not have anything to do with politics. But now, when you have the opportunity to explain yourself and change the perception of the public about you, you didn't take issue about that. Politically, there is a problem. Many people believe that Mr. President is not prepared to change the service chiefs because they believe that these service chiefs are very, very ambitious and that they are likely, for instance, if removed, they can come back and plan coup. Whether it is right or not, it is one issue. The second point there, and I conclude on that, you see, the PDP, is feared. APC believes that if they now allow Mr. President to go there, governors in the states in the future may face the challenge from the House of Assembly.
Well, on that note, Prof, let me bring Yemi into the conversation. Yemi Adamolekun, your take on the various submissions by Senator Dino Melaye on the program today.
I mean, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. On the broader issues, really, and I think that for me is really the focus. Prof talked about it being an issue of legality or legality, either or. But I think for me, what's really paramount is the fact that, first of all, the National Assembly has the powers to summon the president. And why are they summoning the president? There's an issue of insecurity in the country. And as the representatives of the people, we have a concern. We have three arms of government. Part of the mandate of the legislative arm of government is to hold government, the executive, accountable. And you hold people accountable by asking questions, which is one of the main focuses that we as a people need to really put the feet of our legislators to fire, in the fact that unlike President Buhari, one president for the country, but everybody has a senator, everybody has a House of Rep member, and we should hold them accountable because they are there to represent us. The Constitution of the Federal Republic clearly states that the welfare and the security of people shall be the primary purpose of government. So when the executive is not delivering on that, citizens can put pressure on the legislative arm to ask that they hold the executive accountable. And that, in my opinion, is simply what the National Assembly was doing, and they have a right to do that. When Mr. Gbajabiamila came out from his meeting with the president, he said, oh, the president is even more concerned than you and I. The president agreed to come. As we've seen in other countries, the president can choose not to attend. He was summoned, but he can choose not to go. However, the premise of the Attorney General was that he can't be summoned, is what I have a problem with. I mean, a newspaper article from 2012 has been circulating when former governor of Lagos State, Babatunde Fashola, said that the National Assembly has the powers to summon the president. And it's the same president that's talking about impeaching President Jonathan by not being able to deliver. So I think, for me, fundamentally, National Assembly has the powers. Number two, there is a problem of insecurity in this country that Mr. President has refused to engage. And to show just how bad it is, and I mean, as bad as the kidnapping in the school was yesterday, for me, I think it's also a very fortuitous occasion, if I dare say that. I mean, it's an unfortunate incident, but let's just be very clear. Because Mr. President has refused to engage on this issue, kidnappers decided that in your own state, in your own backyard, we will show you who's boss. And that's simply, for me, the message that they have sent. And I think in that regard, I think it's an important message to put into context. When in a country that is being governed by a former military head, that kidnappers are able to tell him in his backyard that we've got this country and you are not in control. Now, the response of the Mr. President has also been very interesting. He's done nothing, as far as I can see. Our service chiefs are still there. Nothing has happened. So for me, I think the sequence of events speaks to where we are as a country. Deep insecurity and a president that is really not concerned. Meanwhile, Mr. Gbajabiamila is saying he's more concerned than you and I. I'm sorry, I don't see it. But what for me is also a bit troubling is almost 7 years ago, as someone alluded to, when the Chibok girls were kidnapped, it was indeed a watershed moment for the Jonathan administration in terms of the response, but we've learned nothing. And it's also important, unfortunately, from citizens, what has happened in that 6 years as we become very numb to the pain of our fellow nationals. Chibok girls were kidnapped. Citizens, women's groups sprung into action. There were protests that almost 7 years later, Bring Back Our Girls is still a clarion call. We meet every Saturday in Lagos. In Abuja, before COVID, they were meeting every day at the Unity Fountain to show you the kind of movement that Bring Back Our Girls had. This Katsina one, would it have that similar type of movement? I'm not sure it would, because as a people, there's so many things that this administration has done that we're so battered by. But as a people, and I really want to end with that, let's also be very clear that the issues that political parties bring to discourse, that we've seen again how we played out over the last 6 years. The APC rode on Bring Back Our Girls and some of the other insecurity happenings leading up to the 2015 election to reflect on the incompetence, I would say, because the Jonathan administration at that time responded very incompetently to the abduction, kidnappings in the country, insecurity in the country. APC framed themselves as being led by former commander-in-chief who will have security under control, bloody. 6 years later, we've seen that we're in exactly the same spot.
Well,
and that is, for me,
Yemi, on that
hold
note.
on a second. This is an important point to make, Mr. Abati,
well,
please.
Every point is important.
Sorry, let me land this point, but let me land
in 1 second.
But yes, it is important to realize that as APC members go to PDP and PDP members go to APC, that as a people, we must recognize that there's no difference in the two parties. They've governed in the same way. Our results, worse or worse, in the same way. So when we begin to talk about our political parties and the lack of ideology, this is how it plays out. When you're as comfortable in APC as you are in PDP, it tells me you have there's no difference.
You still get a chance to talk more about insecurity, because that's also what our next topic is all about. The current state of insecurity in the country has every Nigerian worried, with the Boko Haram insurgency refusing to abate in the northeast and rising kidnappings and banditry in the northwest. There appears to be no end in sight to the violence and killings that have pervaded the land. The recent murder of farmers in Borno State and the kidnapping of scores of schoolboys from a Katsina State secondary school this weekend directly address the vulnerability of the nation's security architecture. Even more disturbing is the fact that Nigeria's promising military officers, many of them very young, have continued to die in the hands of insurgents and bandits who are fighting an unconventional war with the state. Not only have the ranks of the Nigerian military been decimated, these patriotic men have equally been demoralized. All this has given rise for the clamor by some Nigerians for the re-engagement of mercenaries who can provide tactical support to the military and fight side by side Nigerian troops. Now begging the question on whether or not it is time to re-engage mercenaries. Last Thursday, I spoke with a director of Conela Services, private military company that was contracted by the Goodluck Jonathan administration to fight alongside the Nigerian military between December 2014 and March 2015 in the war against Boko Haram. On This Day Live today, we shall be taking a clip from that interview, which shall be broadcast in full tomorrow on the morning show on Arise News, on what this gentleman from Conela Services had to say about their involvement in the battle against Boko Haram. However, for reasons of confidentiality, his name and identity shall not be disclosed. Let's take a look.
November or late October 2014, we were asked by Colonel Dasuki and his staff to pay them a visit in Abuja and to listen to the nature of the problem and see if we could come up with a solution. As a result of those discussions, a planning cycle was done, visits was conducted to the operational areas in the north and the northeast of Nigeria, and eventually a contract was drafted and signed between the government of Nigeria and our company. Our company is called Conela Services, and at that point in time, we registered a local entity in Nigeria as required by the law, and we then agreed with the government that we would, as quickly as humanly possible, mount an operation in order to help and assist the Nigerian military. It's important to know that the contract is not something, or did not call for us to replace the Nigerian military. The Nigerian military has a proud history. Unfortunately, the Nigerian military has lost, at that point in time, a lot of the knowledge that they required to deal with an insurgency of the nature of Boko Haram. The Nigerian military is trained and constituted and equipped in a conventional manner. It is designed to meet and match another army of the same size and the same type. It is poorly put together and poorly constituted and poorly organized in terms of an insurgency. Our strength lies in our ability and our knowledge to counter a insurgency such as the one that Boko Haram has brought upon Nigeria. Therefore, we were contracted. That was the background to that. We were contracted by the National Security Advisor, Colonel Dasuki, and his office. And I hasten to add that it was that administration and that office that also terminated the contract. It was not the current administration. By the time the current administration took power, we were long gone, unfortunately. And the main reason for that termination was non-payment. We had milestones written into the contract for payments. Those milestones were unfortunately not met by the Nigerian government. Perhaps priorities changed. perhaps with a view to the election around the corner, people thought differently about where to spend their money. We can only speculate about that, but that was the reason. It was non-payment. It was not non-performance by our side or any other reason. As a matter of fact, we achieved almost the impossible. Within a month of our operations, for the first time in 3 years, 2 major cities that was in the hands of Boko Haram, Bama and Warsaw, was back in the hands of the security forces. And also, right at the end, at the tail end of our contract, the Sambisa forest was being assaulted by our unit. So that's how it came about. After the contract was signed, we had to mobilize. The contract called for our own arms and ammunition to be brought into Nigeria. And since this contract was signed in November, most armaments factories and armaments suppliers closed us down over December. It was a race against time. At the same time, and this is very important, we were not going to fight this battle by ourselves. We were going to merge with the best that Nigeria had, and therefore Nigeria gave us their best young men. The airborne unit of the Nigerian military was presented to us. We selected the best of those candidates, almost all of those boys, and we merged in a very tough training program. We merged with them. So you had experienced leadership presented by ourselves, and you had muscle and power and aggression and fantastic fighting ability brought to the party by the Nigerian men. That unit was called 72 Mobile Strike Force. 72 was a designation that meant that we fought under the command and control of 7th Division, which was based in Maiduguri. And 72 Mobile Strike Force was the unit that was created on the basis of that contract. The strength of a PMC lies in what is lacking in the host country's ability, and that is knowledge. Our strength is our knowledge and our experience. Most of the members of our PMC, Conella Services, was over 50 years old. With 50 years comes perhaps a little bit of slowness on the physical side. As a matter of fact, conditions in Nigeria at the beginning were so strenuous that one of our men lost his life. He died during training. It was because of a heart attack. It could not be foreseen. He had a weak heart, and he was older than 50 years old. So he died. These are the risks that sometimes accompanies that kind of training that was required. But the point I'm making is our men was experienced, and by merging our experience and our knowledge with the power and the strength and the youth of the Nigerian fighting soldiers, you had a fantastic mix. 72 Mobile Strike Force was a really unique unit, very strong, well-equipped, and when it went into operations for the first time, it had a resounding success. As a matter of fact, after Conella Services was withdrawn, 72 MSF continued the fight. They did not have the benefit of our knowledge and our experience. They did not have the benefit of our helicopters and our pilots any longer. And may I add, Nigeria does have good pilots. Nigeria does have good aircraft, but it takes many years of experience to be able to fly combat missions in the heart of the night at a high speed, at low level, in order to take on the insurgents. It's not as if this is a standing army that's dug in trenches over many kilometers. The insurgents are divided into small bands. As we know, they move around on motorcycles, on Okada. They use vehicles they call technicals. These are typical vehicles that they have stolen and looted. And they put weapons on the back of them, and they sleep alone in the bush in small bands. In order to find them and in order to combat them, our aircraft was required. Unfortunately, 72 MSF had to fight ahead and fight on without that benefit of that. They did magnificently. I must say that after we had withdrawn, they penetrated Sambisa forest, our Nigerian boys, and they did fantastic. They released more than 600 camp followers. These are women and children held against their will by Boko Haram. And the success is carried on. Unfortunately, without the benefit of our technical expertise maintaining the vehicles, without our pilots flying our helicopters in their support, their efforts was not enough. And therefore, we now have a resurgence in Boko Haram.
Well, let me ask you, I mean, it's good you talked about the 72 Mobile Strike Force. What was the nature of your engagement with the Nigerian military? Was it just training or maintenance of equipment or area support, or your men, your company were directly involved in physical combat, direct physical combat?
some contracts issued to PMCs only call for technical support and training. That is where the bread and butter of our line of business lies. But sometimes the contract calls for combat operations to be conducted on behalf of the client. And that was so in this case. We conducted combat operations alongside our Nigerian brothers and with our Nigerian soldiers in our vehicles and under our command and alongside us. And it went fantastic. We did well. Unfortunately, there were incidents. We lost 2 South Africans that were killed. Their blood was spilled in the north of Nigeria. Their bodies are back home and they were buried by their families. Their insurance paid out to the families a hefty sum, as it is in our business. But the operations that we conducted and the way that we fought alongside our Nigerian men was magnificent. It was a success, and if we had been allowed to continue, it would have probably put an end to, at least it would have forced Boko Haram's military operations to a stop. And really, that is what Boko Haram has at this point in time. Boko Haram does not have political power. Boko Haram does not really dominate much of territory. What Boko Haram has is fear. What we brought was a counter to that fear. We were able to show the way. We were the tip of the spear, and following us, the Nigerian military was rejuvenating at that point already and is getting better by the day, I have to add that. They would have destroyed Boko Haram. We would have forced them to either stop, seize, withdraw, or to negotiate.
Well, there was the insurgency, the Boko Haram, but there was also the abduction of 276 Chibok girls, which had occurred in April 2014. Did you get any direct requests to help in rescuing the Chibok girls who had been abducted by the insurgents?
The initial discussions held with Colonel Dasuki focused very much on the Chibok girls. The colonel was, as the National Security Advisor to the President, hugely troubled by the kidnapping of those girls. One could sense that from his and his staff, that was a priority. They were at a loss to determine where these girls were, and that's nobody's to blame for that, because the girls were already by then divided up. By the end of 2014, the largest group of girls that we could find with our aircraft at night from the air was 12. They were held in a house outside Warza, if I recall correctly. They were made to work in the fields in the daytime, and they were brought back to the house under guard at night. The girls were scattered. Some of them had been taken outside of Nigeria by then. So unfortunately, yes, a lot of the discussion was around, and a lot of our tactics and our equipment was designed to raid locations where these girls were being held. Just as special forces all over the world, we know how to arrive on a target in the quiet of night without making a noise. We descend with what's called fast ropes from helicopters, or we land and we walk in, whatever is required. We use night vision equipment. These are special sights that we put on our weapons that enable the weapon to be fired at night. We wear binocular or monocular night vision equipment on our helmets that allows us to see at night. And then we train. And we trained our Nigerian boys in the beginning as in those same tactics in order to raid the location and free the people inside, rush them several kilometers away, put them in helicopters and fly them home. Unfortunately, that opportunity never arose. Our focus changed, our mission changed, and it was in direct opposition of Boko Haram, where they were deployed against the Nigerian armed forces.
Well, very interesting revelations there by the director and spokesperson of that private military company that took part in engaging the Boko Haram insurgents between 2014 and 2015, Kunela Services from South Africa. The full interview will be available tomorrow on the morning shows, still here on Arise News. But Prof, let me start with you, because there is an international relations dimension here. Questions have been raised about the role of private military contractors in conflict situations with regard to either the Warsaw Convention, 1949, or the additional protocols of 1971. But now in Nigeria, starting with Governor Zulum of Borno State and others, one of the suggestions about how to deal with the security challenge in Nigeria is to call back private military companies, also popularly known by Nigerians and others as mercenaries, to help save the situation, since it appears that the Nigerian military is overwhelmed. What do you think, Prof?
2 quick points. Zulum, by asking for intervention of private armies, may be right. But there is a specific international convention on mercenaries.
Yes, the UN Convention on Mercenaries.
Yes. If you go back to the UN General Assembly Resolution 43/34, which was done in, at the 72nd plenary session of the Assembly. It adopted that resolution, and the resolution itself eventually led to the signing of a convention which now entered into force in 2001. Nigeria signed the convention. That was in April 1990. But Nigeria is not on record to have ratified it, not to talk of domesticating it within the framework of Nigeria's municipal law. Now, the issue is that this convention prohibits the use of mercenaries, the training of mercenaries, and so on and so forth. But the issue now is that when you now factor in the issue of legitimate self-defense, when you have national insecurity, how do you then sustain that principle? Every state has the right to the rule of legitimate self-defense. And Boko Haramis, all these threats cannot be set aside. When, for instance, those who argue against the use of mercenaries come up with the argument that, yes, we had them before 2014, but they all left. What is very important in the submission of Cornelia's services submission, they made it clear that they left not because of non-performance, but because of non-payment subsequently. Now, the challenge is, if you now bring the private armies, you have mercenaries again, what are you going to do with the payment? Are we going to pay? But what is more important to underscore when we are discussing mercenaries, this particular convention of mercenaries made it clear in its definition of what constitutes who is a mercenary. Is there a mercenary? In this case, is anyone who, first of all, is not a national of the country that is seeking to engage them, is not part of the military of the host country, but who essentially is paid, giving, emoluments that are better enhanced than the regular combatants, the regular
the soldier of fortune.
And now, the point of articulation is that a sovereign state inviting mercenaries, you invite them, their purpose is to come and fight in an armed conflict. But the same definition by the United Nations has it that a mercenary also can, for his own selfish reason, if he has motivation, he can engage in it, he can be there. But the cardinal purpose of mercenary engagement this time is to undermine the territorial integrity of the country. It is also to undermine, to oust, to plan coup, to remove governments. So meaning now that conceptually, mercenary can be used by an existing government, and it can also be used by non-governmental purposes. Consequently, if you are bringing mercenaries in, what about the Boko Haramis who are also being used internationally against Nigeria.
Let me go to Yemi. Yemi, we're talking about mercenaries. Earlier on, I mixed up Warsaw Convention and Geneva Convention. I mentioned Warsaw, right? Warsaw Convention is that of 1929 relating to international airlines operations. It's the Geneva Convention that brings up the issue about international humanitarian law with regard to war, and that was 1949. Your take, should Nigeria bring back the mercenaries to help us?
I was trying to follow Prof's argument there about the difference and what is, in a sense, the law doesn't allow. The law basically doesn't allow, if I'm not mistaken, mercenaries in a country that then undermine the territorial integrity of the country and are used to foster a coup or not. And in the versus what I heard from the gentleman who you interviewed, which is that they were brought in to provide leadership and equipment to fight on the side of the Nigerian army, if I want to use that word. One of the things that he said that was quite striking, and that's if I understood what he said correctly, so quite different. But what I took from one of the things that he said that was quite interesting was the fact that he recognized and said that the Nigerian army has a proud history of being able to fight, but they are set up to fight another army of maybe equal size or smaller size in a particular way. But that because Boko Haram fights in a different sort of way, that we were not equipped to engage Boko Haram on those terms. And that's what they brought to the table: leadership, experience, and equipment. And he said several times during your interview how well, even though he was calling them boys, and I didn't quite understand that, but he spoke several times and spoke quite highly of the men of the Nigerian army and how they fought well, how they trained well, and the successes that they recorded, both under their leadership and after they left for non-payment. And again, I think for me, that's really very critical. We've talked about this on different times, and it's been said over and over again, how the men of the Nigerian army perform when they are men and, my apologies, men and, well, I use men for men and women, but anyway, how the men and women of the Nigerian army perform well when they are in UN peacekeeping missions and in other parts, ECOMOG, or when they're outside of Nigeria, because they have the tools, the equipment, and critically the leadership that allows them to put in their optimum performance. And I think, again, we've talked about the not sacking the service chiefs who have not provided leadership in that regard, the discontent within the ranks of the army and what that has meant in terms of performance. We've covered stories of people saying, you know what, I signed up for this army, but this is not what I signed up for. I'm not interested anymore. So I think for me, beyond the technicality of do we want mercenaries or not, the problem that we have that we need to deal with is that we have an army that is being decimated in a sense from within and from leadership, i.e. the commander-in-chief. And if a commander-in-chief not only is not engaging the people he is commanding, but he's spending more time chasing NSAS protesters, CNN and BBC broadcast, and not addressing the issues, I dare say that President Buhari is behaving like a coward. And your concern about not wanting to go to the National Assembly so you're not booed and heckled, if you say something there that speaks to your concern and your understanding of the security issues and your concern for Nigerians, nobody will boo and heckle you. But if you go there and say rubbish, don't have any clear path to take us out of this thing, then be ready to deal with the booing and the heckling. And running away from it and not engaging Nigerians and speaks to things that are consistently not only killing the young women, men, old, that is cowardice at the highest level in this country. And I dare the APC government, I dare APC members to speak to their national leader, the president of this country, that this is completely unacceptable for leadership of the giant of Africa in the 21st century.
Well, at this point, I would like to bring Chike into the conversation. And Chike, please, if we could just stay with the issue of mercenaries and, the relevance or otherwise to the security situation in Nigeria.
Yeah, the truth is that both Yemi and Prof have dealt with, all the peripherals. It's difficult talking about these things without, going to all these other things. But just like Yemi pointed out, what was important to me in that interview was the fact that the gentleman said and agreed that, yes, indeed, we have a competent army, or our military is strong, But of course, the focus of the training of the military is such that it had never focused on asymmetric warfare, the type of which they have to confront with Boko Haram, and that was why they were contracted. And provided international laws agreed, Prof has alluded to that, you know, the conventions for getting in mercenaries and all of that. And if a country gets to a situation where you actually require the services of a mercenary or of mercenaries, I think the most important thing that country would do at that point in time is to have the appropriation to pay these people, knowing that your security is being threatened, knowing that, you know, you have a situation where even your territorial integrity is at stake. How then do you contract people that should come and help you return that situation back to normalcy, and you now start not having money to pay them? That is a crying shame. And until I heard this today from this interview, I never knew that was the situation, because we heard all sorts of things, you know, typical of Nigeria in the marketplace. Some people said it was the Buhari administration that came in and terminated that contract because they did not want, you know, obviously Jonathan and his administration to get any credit for anything. So you see, these kind of things are really, really appalling. And I don't understand, you know, in my mind, how a country can get to that extent of taking such a drastic measure of contracting mercenaries and then now defaulting in the payment. That, to my mind, does not make sense at all. That is the truth. That is what I can say about that, since you want me to stay on that issue.
Yes, well, Chike, Prof, and Yemi, as I said earlier, the full interview will be available tomorrow morning on Arise News during the morning show. There's still a lot more in that package, but we'll see it tomorrow. Let's move on to Ghana. Last Wednesday, President Nana Akufo-Addo was declared winner of the Ghanaian presidential election, having secured more than 50% of the total ballots cast. His main challenger and former President John Mahama was able to garner just over 47% of the votes.
I am deeply humbled again by your show of confidence, and I do not take this lightly. There could be that tendency for an incumbent president who has just secured a second term in office to, as it were, take it easy and relax, because there's nothing more to lose or prove. I am of a different character. Just as I've been doing since January 2017, I give you my word that I will continue to work very hard to build the prosperous and progressive Ghana for which we yearn. The decisive margin of victory in this election constitutes for me an endorsement of the policies and programs initiated by my government and put before the electorate. And I'm determined to do all in my power to accomplish the tasks of this new mandate and thereby justify the confidence reposed in me. I assure you, fellow Ghanaians, that I'll do my best not to let you down. The period for campaigning is over, and the outcome of the election has been decided. The Ghanaian people, through the results, have made it loud and clear that the two parties, the MPP and NDC, must work together, especially in Parliament, for the good of the country.
President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana there extending the hand of fellowship and togetherness to the opposition parties. But the election outcome did not sit well with Mahama, who rejected the final results announced by the country's Electoral Commission, saying that the standard process of collation of results known to Ghana was violated by the electoral umpire. He further stated that the acceptance of an error in the computation of the total valid votes by the Commission called to question the credibility of the entire process and asked for the declaration of the results that reflected the true will of the people. Let's take a look.
Let history look back and be proud of how we united and stood up to fight for the people's fundamental rights to freely elect their leaders, devoid of crude political manipulation. And it is for this reason that my colleagues and I in the NDC will not accept what we know to be a fraudulent outcome of these elections. And we will take all legitimate steps to reverse this travesty of justice.
John Mahama's position was another in a series of election outcomes that have trailed the declaration of the results in the West African country. Should we expect another election challenge that will be decided by the country's Supreme Court? Well, looks so. Looks like that is what likely to happen, because President Mahama is saying that every legitimate step, concrete and decisive step, will be taken to challenge the results announced. And, you know, other members of his party are also drawing attention to the use of the military during the election. They're talking about the computational error, which the Electoral Commission corrected. Initially, President Nana Akufo-Addo was given 51.59% of the votes, and that was revised to 51.3% of the votes, not affecting the outcome eventually in terms of the winner. But Yemi, let me start with you. You were once an electoral observer in Ghana, and we had a lot of hope about this particular election, but it looks like the 8th election in the Fourth Republic in Ghana has raised questions about the reputation of that country in terms of political stability.
Well, not quite sure it's that grave. Maybe I've missed something, but at least what is, for me, significant is the fact that this is their third time out. The first time out, Mahama won, and Nana Akufo-Addo went to court. Second time, Nana won. Third time, Nana's won, and it's now Mahama that's going to court. Would be interesting. I think also interesting in terms of the trajectory of Ghana as it comes to elections. It's Nigeria that's notorious for challenging election results. And the fact that it's now almost creeping into Ghana's sort of election culture, for me, I find fascinating. So it'll be interesting to see how it turns out, what some of the issues, some of the cogent issues that will be the basis of his challenge would be.
Well, I mean, it's been alleged that 5 people were killed, the military was used, 19 persons were injured, there were a total of 60 incidents of violence, and the coalition of election observers are alleging about 258 cases of voter suppression. The NDC says it will challenge both the presidential results and the parliamentary results. But Chike, let me come to you. What are the lessons that we can learn from Ghana in this election?
Well, you know, we saw some very worrying visuals from that election. And for a country that was one of the most peaceful, that had one of the most peaceful electoral processes in the continent, to become that violent from what we saw, you know, that was from when I knew that things were obviously changing in Ghana. Now we have a situation of what is going on in America, which is supposed to be, you know, the policeman of the free world, as it were, and then, you know, the pathfinder to democracy. And we are seeing those very disgraceful acts of subversion of constitutionalism and democracy in America. The next door, Ghana, that used to have, I mean, we knew what the hallmarks of the elections in Ghana always were. 1, they were peaceful. 2, they were clean. And 3, and more importantly, they would be keenly contested. So there was no, you know, winner-take-all kind of situation. It was always with a very slim margin. Now we've seen that, you know, I mean, you can see 49 point something, I mean, 47 point something, 51 point something, and all of that. So it is still keenly contested, which shows that it's still a strong two-party state. But what has happened to the Ghanaians have to ask themselves now, what has happened to the fact that they used to have peaceful elections, and why has this gone so violent? And again, like I think Yemi was alluding to the fact that initially, you know, Nana Akufo-Addo, the president, now went to court when he lost the first time. But the second time, You know, when Mahaman lost, he didn't go to court the first time. Then he now wants to go to court again. That again is opening, you know, a situation where Ghanaians will start, you know, will they start having their presidents made by the judiciary, or made by the people, or made by, you know, the process of democracy. So these are the kind of things they need to ask themselves, and they need to, like they say, go back and find out where the rain started beating them. Because if I know anything about Africa and the way we go, once a trajectory is turned and once Ghana starts on this path of contentious elections, then, you know, it's going to run away with it, and that would be a pity, you know. That's exactly what I think.
Okay, well, Prof, let me come to you. Ghanaian elections, parliamentary and presidential. And Chike, you are very right. It was keenly contested because in the parliamentary election now, the MPP, the ruling party, has 137 seats. The NDC has 136 seats in that election in terms of the results. Yes, Prof, over to you.
When we did discuss Ghanaian elections last time here on this platform, my position was that under normal circumstances, the incumbent president, Nana Akufo-Addo, shouldn't win and shouldn't have won, because the election was basically about choosing between infrastructure and the economy. Mahama campaigned on the basis of his records on having provided infrastructure. But Addo campaigned on the basis of ongoing economic efforts. And I think that what has happened in Ghana is that people remember more what they are currently seeing. They cannot easily, quickly remember the issue of provision for infrastructure. More so when you provide infrastructure as far back as 2012, all along, what is it they've been using it? Who remembers what Gowon and Babangida had done to Third Mainland Bridge, Babangida Bridge, all those things? People have forgotten. But when you are now campaigning now, well, you are likely to quickly remember the currency of the situation. What I'm trying to say here is that, look, like Chike tried to talk about the trajectory being changed and the likelihood of following the new path, that cannot be easily set aside. I agree with him. And I think that Mahama should go to the court and look at it. There's no reason why, for instance, there should be arithmetical miscalculation. It may be a genuine mistake, but at the end of the day, violence is already been introduced. So Ghanaian elections are now being Nigerianized in one way. We are used to it. The style in Nigeria is so that, look, politicians in Nigeria strongly believe that, look, you can rig. Allow those who will protest to go to court. And by the time you go to court, you have done at least more than half, term in office. All these approaches need to be reviewed. In Africa, we cannot easily talk about elections that will not be protested. So it's part of our lifestyle. And as pointed out by Chike again, looking at the American approach, Donald Trump is simply trying to bastardize the democratic values to which American people have been used. And in this case, what is happening in Ghana, all these peaceful elections, elections that are clean. You know, nobody is taking interest in such values anymore. And things are changing in Ghana. And I think that if efforts are made to revisit, the election results, we will know the truth. Mr. Donald Trump now can now see more clearly that he lost. The same way we can look at it at the level of Ghana. If Mahama goes to court and he's disproved, then he will now know where the balance is.
Well, I think the interesting point, of course, is that President John Mahama, former President John Mahama, is saying that, his party would do everything that is legitimate.
Precisely.
So the emphasis is on legitimacy. But I guess one other major takeaway from the Ghanaian election is the level of voter turnout, because we talk about voter apathy a lot in Nigeria. But in this election, about 79% voter turnout was recorded. 17 million voters, over 13 million voted. And I think that is quite impressive in terms of the people participating in choosing their own leaders for the next 4 years. Let's move on. Let's take one more topic before we call it a day on this edition. The Nigerian government last week issued a directive for the reopening of COVID-19 treatment centers across the country, on fears that the country could be on the cusp of a second wave of the pandemic. Speaking at the briefing of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, the Minister of Health, Dr. Chike Ogeah, said he had directed health workers to be on red alert because of a spike in the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the past week, raising concerns of a second wave. In the same breath, the government said it had set the machinery in motion for the receipt of 20 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines early in 2021, with the first set of doses to be administered to workers in the health sector as well as vulnerable citizens. Well, what we have seen is that in the last few weeks, the numbers have gone up from about 350, 351 that was reported initially. The numbers went up to 500, 501. And this week, I think the highest figure has been over 800. Yesterday, we had over 700 new cases, with Lagos and the Federal Capital Territory having the largest numbers. And we've also had reports of high-profile persons. I referred earlier to General Irifin. In Lagos, the governor of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, also tested positive for COVID-19. We wish him speedy recovery. The governor of Kaduna State is also in isolation. And so these isolation centers are to be reopened. I hope they are in good condition, and I hope that the Nigerian government, at both the federal government level and the subnational level, are looking at what needs to be done, particularly with regard to getting a vaccine program in place. Prof, let me start with you on this.
I asked myself, was there any good rationale behind even closing the isolation centers? Was there any good reason? I wouldn't see one. Why? Because we are not on record to have been carrying on with tests. Secondly, is it because we now have what we call high-profile cases that we are now probably seeing the need to direct that the isolation centers be reopened? As I did not believe, and I do not believe that there was any good reason, first of all, to have closed down the centers. Now, the government knew and still knows that the mere fact that there is a decline in the number of active cases shouldn't, under normal circumstances, have prompted closing that down. But now that they are asking for reopening, it clearly shows that the problem is not only still there, but they now want to now take a more preventive measure, which is commendable from that perspective that, okay, you are now anticipating a second wave. And in order to be in a position to control the impact, I think we can salute the courage of government in trying to do just that. But more importantly, we are talking about these vaccines. The controversy still surrounding the vaccine is still there. I had the opportunity of participating in a discussion, in a lecture, in a webinar of the Nigerian who took active part in the Pfizer's research. It was
Dr. Ogeah. That's his name, Dr.
Yes,
Ogeah.
It was yesterday, 6 p.m. Nigerian time, for about 2 hours. He was explaining the need, the usefulness of the vaccines. But the many observations made, people accusing him that are you not being used just to make a case for Pfizer and all others. People raised the issue to say those who actually took active part in manufacturing and producing the vaccines are not readily prepared to be vaccinated. In fact, Ogeah was asked, are you going actually to accept to be vaccinated? He said yes, and we have a public video of that. What I'm trying to say is that many people doubt this issue of vaccine.
Prof, you're talking about what they call vaccine hesitancy. And it's not just, in one place, in different parts of the world, Italy, even in the United States, there's vaccine
because the DNA
hesitancy.
is artificial.
Because of suspicion, also because of concerns about what is called medical colonialism. But Yemi, let me come to you quickly, and then Chike, please be on standby. What are your thoughts?
As the sort of comment goes, COVID is not, the way we've reacted to COVID has really lowered our response to it. I think without a shadow of a doubt, the second wave is already here. And I join Prof in saying that it's good that government is asking the isolation centers to be open. He said, why were they closed in the first place? I'd say cost. I mean, these isolation centers were brought up to deal with this particular issue. So in terms of saving costs, if you don't think they're needed, I think 2 in Lagos, for example, were shut down. They were even privately set up. So it was private money. Like the landmark one was private money funding them, and they couldn't continue to leave it since they were not in need. But I think ultimately, while people are talking about what else must government do, is that the message really has to be about personal responsibility. We must just ensure for those who know that the virus is real, who believe that it has the potential to take lives, we just must ensure that those in our immediate vicinity understand that and act accordingly. We've seen numerous weddings, numerous social functions that nobody has a mask on and no social distance being kept at all. So it's not about, I think, Dr. Abati, to your point earlier, it's not about religious institutions not obeying. You're right, they're not. But I think ultimately, given what is there, government needs to do its job into ensuring that laws are obeyed. And citizens also need to do their part and take responsibility for their lives and ensure that they are complying with laid down protocol.
Well, Chike, are you not concerned that even with all these figures going up, second wave being announced, that Nigerians still think that COVID-19 is a scam, that it's just an opportunity for public officials to enrich themselves? And then secondly, with regard to the vaccine, the major challenge in the world is about distribution. Who gets what? Which country gets what? There is a People's Vaccine Alliance where the argument is being put forward that, look, poor countries are not likely to get this vaccine because countries like Canada and the US and UK, they've even ordered doses more than their people will need. Canada, for example, about 5 times the requirement of its population. Now, Nigeria and other African countries are relying on charity under the COVAX Alliance, a COVAX Alliance that the WHO and Gavi Alliance are still looking for money for donations to be able to fund it. What else should we do?
Let me take the first one, the one about Nigerians feeling that maybe, government is being funny about this thing. Yes, I've even heard some people that should know better say that even these governors that we just talked about Governor Sanwo-Olu, who obviously is, I think having it for the second time, and even El-Rufai that is isolating now because he was around someone that's had it lately. You remember he had it before. So that makes them feel that is why they are even saying this, because they are trying to make cases for themselves so that they can get appropriation, get some more money that they can spend and all of that, But I think it is unfortunate because these were not illiterates that were saying this to me. I know because I'm quite involved with this COVID thing, like you noticed the other time. It's very unfortunate because COVID is very real. We've lost very, very close ones to COVID. As I speak now, I even have very close friends of mine who are in hospital because of COVID as we speak. And what I think I have noticed is that this second wave seems to be more vicious than the one we first witnessed. So we have to be very, very careful. Our guards have to be up. We have to go through the normal routine, face masks, social distancing, washing our hands. We have to continue with all of that. Yes, parties have returned to Lagos, I've noticed. Churches have opened and all of that. Even in the marketplaces, open congregations. People think it's gone, and all that, but it is not true. I think government has to, upscale the advocacy to let people know that indeed we are still having a major problem with COVID-19, and it is still very, very real. I think that's very important. Then the second aspect of the question you talked about is that poorer countries, when are the vaccines going to come? And you remember you talked about vaccine resistance when you spoke earlier with Prof. The truth is that, yes, those that can afford it will want to have it all and safeguard the lives of their people and all of that. But I think that WHO should have a kind of arrangement because we are all part of humanity, whether in Africa, in Asia, or wherever we might be, and say, look, there should be, a kind of pro rata appropriation of these things where no matter how poor a region is or a country is, they must get something for the most vulnerable, maybe the older people and all of that. So I think something like that should come up. That is the only way we can be safeguarded. Otherwise, it's just going to be the same old story. Where is your money? You have to put your money on your table and put your money where your mouth is for you to be able to get any vaccine. And like I said earlier on, the threat is real. COVID is still very, very present with us, and it poses a potent force against our common humanity.
Well, you are quite right, Chike. The WHO, World Health Organization, is saying that access to vaccine is a moral issue and that the world must embrace the principle of solidarity to ensure justice and equity. Thank you, Chike. Thank you, Prof. And thank you, Yemi. You've been watching This Day Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Reuben Abati. From our entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now. And thank you very much for watching. Join us again next Sunday.